The very first PG-13 movie was also named the most violent film ever. So most people know that prior to 1984, the US movie rating system had G for movies appropriate for all audiences, PG for parental guidance, movies without swearing, nudity, or violence, and R for restricted, expect adult content, kids under 17 need a chaperone. But in 1984, Steven Spielberg put out Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and Gremlins, which he produced. Both were rated PG, but really pushed the rating's limit in terms of violence, and that apparently annoyed a lot of parents who weren't expecting such visceral films. And so the MPA introduced the PG-13 rating, a designation between PG and R. The first movie ever to be released with a PG-13 rating would be Red Dawn, a World War III fantasy about a group of teens fighting back against Russian invaders, and it was exceptionally violent. Patrick Swayze makes C. Thomas Howell drink a cup of blood in the first act. And anyway, a lot of conservative voices were displeased with the PG-13 rating because they felt movies that were previously R-rated would now be labeled PG-13, and that would lead to a lot of teenagers seeing even more violence, sex, and swearing. So these concerned parents latched on to Red Dawn as a perfect example. Psychiatrist Dr. Thomas Radecki, who was the head of the National Coalition on Television Violence, most famous for claiming that Dungeons & Dragons was driving young men to violence, he counted the amount of violent acts in Red Dawn and claimed it had 134 violent acts per hour, which comes out to about 2 violent acts every minute. And then the Guinness Book of World Records also declared that Red Dawn was the most violent movie ever up until that point. But I guess it wasn't violent enough to get an R rating. In the end, the PG-13 rating worked. It quieted most critics who were worried about adult content in PG movies, and in turn, the MPA actually got stricter about dropping violent films below an R rating. They made sure that if a movie was violent, it was probably going to be R. And as for Dr. Radecki, he had his medical license suspended in 1992 for alleged sexual misconduct, and then in 2016, he was sent to prison for having traded opioids in exchange for sexual favors.